Hello and welcome to the Claret and Blue podcast. My name is Dan Rolinson. I'm joined here this afternoon by John Townley for what is a new show, kind of, for us on the channel. Over the last couple of months, I've made a conscious decision to start introing our videos as hello and welcome to Claret and Blue and making shorter, snappier content, maybe 20 minutes about Douglas Luiz or a 25-minute Q&A. Kind of moved away from calling everything a podcast because it wasn't podcast length. So for the new season, we wanted to bring back podcast length content. Every Monday, we're going to be doing this show, the Claret and Blue podcast, you and me, John, maybe some special guests as well going into the future to talk about the weekend's football with a more measured approach than we would with the raw emotional reaction of a match day evening, and look ahead to the week coming up for Villa, as well as any big talking points, for example, transfers, and if somebody gets a big injury, so you can tell where today's show is probably going. John, how are you?
Doing well, thanks, mate. Still a bit raw from the weekend, and as you mentioned, the injury or two injuries. Looking forward to the weekend. Everton at home on Sunday. So, it's probably the best game you could hope for in a way to sort of right some wrongs, I guess. Dreadful start to the season, really, all things considered, but we've got to stay positive. There's loads to look forward to in the season. So, I'm doing fine, thank you.
Yeah, I'm hoping this is not going to be an uplifting podcast in the sense that, come on, everyone, let's all stick together and be positive. But I don't think we need to be as downbeat as we possibly were on Saturday evening. The Newcastle preview show was overshadowed by the Emi Buendia injury news, and the Newcastle post-match show was overshadowed by the Tyrone Mings injury news. Yeah. To get those two serious injuries over the course of a couple of days has kind of rocked us as a fan base and will have as a squad and staff at Bodymore Heath as well. Like I said, our post-match reaction shows are going to be slightly shorter this season and be that kind of emotional reaction. We've just got back from a game or we've just watched it on TV. How do we feel? What's happened? Whereas on a Monday, we can kind of look at it with maybe a clearer head and look at things that have happened since the match day evening. For example, Saturday night, we didn't know how long Tyrone Mings was going to be out for. And we don't know a time frame from the Villa statement that was put out on Monday morning, but we do know that it's a significant knee injury with surgery required for Tyrone Mings as well. So we can pretty much put two and two together and say it's at least bad as Emi Buendia's, if not worse. The Emi Buendia statement didn't actually say anything about surgery, and then he would still be consulting with a knee specialist. So before we get into the bigger topics around the game, John, you've had a couple of days almost, as this video goes out at least, to have calmed down a little bit than maybe we would have on Saturday evening. Yep. What's your kind of general reaction to that defeat at St James's on the opening day?
It's difficult because ultimately it is only 3 points. But after what happened to Tyrone Mings, it feels much more significant. It feels like I do not have the feeling that we've played 6 games and won 2. Do you know what it's that sort of feeling of, because it is that much of a loss, as we'll get on to. I'll be honest, after the game, I wasn't, obviously we're both fans, we're also, professionals in the media world. I wasn't particularly angry or, I didn't know quite how to feel about it. I was a little bit stunned that we lost 5-1. And speaking to Emery after the game, he was saying it wasn't a 5-1 game. Villa didn't deserve to lose by that margin. And I did agree it shouldn't have been 4 goals. But equally, Newcastle probably could have scored 6, but then maybe Villa should have scored 4. So it was just one of those games and ultimately one of those days that when Newcastle went 3-1 up, which was from the Ezri Konsa mistake, I said it's one of those days and I didn't expect us to then ship 2 more goals and it could have been more. But here we are, and we did lose 5-1. Again, at the weekend, we have a game which I'd like to think we can win, but my overriding feeling at the moment is, okay, well, we need to see a reaction now because not just of the manner of how we lost, but also just to kind of spark that positivity again, because we arrived, heading into the season, there was so much optimism, and I don't think that's been taken away. However, this is a big month for Villa, and I know it's a long season, but you've got 2 Conference League games, which you'd like to think Villa can get through. You need to get through those without injuries now because of the setbacks we've had. The Everton game, you need to win. I know a lot of fans are saying, you need to put on a show, you need to put on a performance, let's stuff them 3 or 4-0, those things. But I'm of the camp of I'd take a 1-0 because you just need to get back in the groove now. When Villa lost those 3 games in a row, Leicester, Man City, Arsenal, what followed after that was Villa being compact. And we know what happened. Emery changed things and we went on a 10-match unbeaten run. That's what we need to be doing now. I don't think Villa are ever going to blow teams away 5-0. And that's also because the Premier League is still a very good level, whoever you're playing, even if it's Luton. So, yeah. Hopefully in the weekend we can just get back to winning ways and that will, kind of calm everyone's feelings, I suppose. But my reaction to it wasn't of anger or anything like that. It's mainly just of maybe a bit of a wake-up call, a bit of deflation, that sort of thing. But a win of the weekend or two do everyone well.
I think shell shocked was probably the emotion that we felt on Saturday evening more so than anything. I had a few comments on the Villa podcast I did and the opposition view that I did with the Newcastle guys. Well, I was not cocky or arrogant, although maybe I came across that way, but I was saying beforehand, I think we could go there and we could win. I didn't say we'd definitely win or we'll batter them or anything like that. I gave both sides a lot of credit. I thought there's possibility we could go there and win and maybe catch Newcastle cold. If anything, it was Newcastle that caught us cold, and we'll talk about fitness and stuff in a little bit as well. There's a few comments after the game saying like, oh, look at this guy. Does he not feel stupid? Do you not feel stupid that you were like bigging Villa up and this happened? The short answer is no. I don't feel stupid. Newcastle are a very good side, and I gave them that credit before the game. The performance probably wasn't a 5-1 in terms of the scoreline gap. It probably was more like a 3-2 kind of game, and any kind of defeat there is obviously bad. Like, you don't want to lose any games. If we had lost 3-2, you'd have come away from it feeling a little bit more measured than a 5-1 suggests. But I think the Tyrone Mings thing is so massive that apart from the instance of losing a footballer and the injury and changing the shape and whatnot, or the system, or the personnel, I should say, that causes you just to concede 5 goals in the end as well. I think if Tyrone Mings doesn't get injured, you don't have that disruption. And I think if the footballer Tyrone Mings is playing and the leadership he brings, I don't think you concede 5 in the first place either. So it probably would have been more like a 3-1, 3-2 kind of game in the end, and we'd have gone, well, Newcastle is a difficult place to go. 3-1, not too bad. On to Everton we go. 5-1 looks worse, and there was a couple of avoidable goals in there. I thought Ezri Konsa's mistake is obviously annoying. There was the stuff with the potential offside with the Isak goal as well. It is the Tyrone Mings thing, and that is the bulk of today's discussion. I think the impact that's going to have, but that's just tears you apart. Pau Torres comes in from the cold a little bit and probably wouldn't even have played at all in that Newcastle game if Tyrone Mings stays fit. That disruption is absolutely huge, and it did shell shock us, I think, as a club and as a fan base and the players on the pitch as well, and that certainly had an impact on the end result, I thought.
I think it's key to mention as well, like, and as you said, Dan, even though you thought maybe Villa were going to win, and to be fair,
I wasn't alone in that, by the way. It was the minority, but there was other people who also thought we could go there and get something.
I was about to say, before the game, I went into a couple of bars in Newcastle and meeting up Villa fans, really positive, thinking, today we can beat this team, and obviously we don't have a good record at Newcastle. So to say that, because that's what Emery's done. He, the first manager for a long time to beat United at Villa Park. Lots of different things he's achieved already. So, and broken different hoodoos and stuff, as we were saying in the pre-match show, I think. But I think Newcastle, they're always going to start well at St James. So to go behind after 6 minutes, not, I don't want to say expected, but that can happen to everyone. Any team, almost in world football, I think. Even Man City could see it against, it's a cauldron. It really is. The away fans are up in the skies, and I don't want to sound like I'm moaning about it, but I'm not sure if that's particularly fair, because you can't hear them, and it's nothing on the Villa fans because they were trying to be as loud as they can. But once you're on at pitch level, it's basically only Newcastle fans, and that's beyond the point. But they're always going to start well, and I thought Villa did really well to come back in the game.
Yeah,
as soon as they did. The second goal happens, which again, Newcastle are a very good team. That can happen. So when Mings was playing, and people have said, Villa still conceded twice when Mings was playing, so maybe we were always going to concede a lot of goals. But I'm with you. I don't think that would have been the case. Those situations do weird things to people, and would Ezri Konsa have, what was it, a ball roll or something that he tried to do?
Over it.
Would he have done that if Tyrone Mings was on the pitch and we were 1 goal? We were. Obviously, it was only 2-1 at the time, but I just... those things I don't think would happen, and they did, because Mings wasn't there. Carlos comes on as well later in the game, so you've got a completely different back line playing in a system that, the reasons why we lost that game 5-1, there was many of them, and I think Tyrone Mings, as you say, coming off and having the extent to the injury of what he had, I think that's what we'll go on to it later, Dan, but I don't know, if he came off with concussion, I don't think we would have been rocked as we were. I think seeing him so distressed, and he's obviously a massive part of that team, that's going to have an effect on anyone. And playing away against Newcastle, there's nowhere to hide. It swallowed us up, basically. The
psychological impact, I think, is something that maybe will go under the radar a little bit, and it could be nothing, and we could be overanalyzing it and overthinking it. But if you put yourself in the mindset of a Villa player, if you can, you're at Bodymoor Heath on Thursday or Friday, and you see Emi Buendia receive a terrible injury in training towards the back end of your preparations for a big away game. And we don't know whether that was a contact challenge and somebody has not inflicted it on him because it's that kind of injury, but they come together in whiplash and cause a knee twist or whatever. And so that player themselves, if that was the case, is going to feel terrible for doing that. If it was an off the ball thing, the whole squad is going to think, we've lost somebody on the eve of a season. That's a very sad thing to have to go through and very annoying and frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
To then be at Newcastle and be 2-1 down in that game and see I know he's not the captain, but your captain, leader, figure, this big 6'5" strapping centre half, go down in such pain with an injury that he's probably had before at Bournemouth and leave the pitch in tears. I don't care what anyone says about kind of the mental health aspect of it and it's, they're overpaid footballers, just get on with it, get on with the game. To see that for what will be for some of them, their friend as well, somebody that I've known for a few years, that will have impacted you. To get 2 serious injuries over the course of a couple of days is going to make you think, God, that could have been me. That definitely had an impact on the pitch because you could feel it in the stadium. I don't know what it was like. Obviously, I wasn't there, but it came across that. Obviously, I'm working at the same time that the game is on, but I'm doing all like the tweets and stuff for the Mings injury. I'm processing pictures as they come through and whatnot. So I've got one eye on that and one eye on the game. But as that was happening from 25-ish minutes onwards, it was like, I'm not really interested in the game at the minute. Like I'm so focused. My headspace is on what's happened to Mings and how is that going to impact Torres coming on, and what if Tyrone Mings can't be involved with Villa going into a European campaign, and all these things are in my head as a fan at home. As a player, I think you'd be thinking the same kind of things, and the coaching staff at St James's. And I don't want to put it all down to that. I don't want to make excuses for the players that make silly mistakes and switch off tracking their man and whatnot. But to lose your friend and teammate in such a horrific way, I'm just making out like he's passed away there, to lose him from the game of football by such a bad injury, that will have impacted the players, I think, and caused, in part, that defeat. There's
nowhere to hide at St James's, and you need full concentration to get anything out of playing, not just that team, but playing in that stadium. And as you said, those players are humans. You've seen your teammate and a friend, being so much distress. Everyone knew straight away, well, that's a serious problem. That's going to be at least 8 months, possibly on the sidelines. We've now lost him for the whole season. He's a massive player for us, 1. And then 2, as we said, that you're going to have feelings for your teammates and people that you know off the pitch as well. So it's very difficult, and especially in that stadium of all places. So, what I would say is a fair play to the Newcastle fans and players as well. That there was, and you're going to get it everywhere. When Mings first went down, you're going to get the bunch of fans there thinking that he's either trying to put on an act to win a foul or whatever. But I think that slowly changed because you see how much pain he was in. It's going to affect you. It's going to affect you not just for the first 30 minutes, for the first hour, which is that game. It's going to affect you for for weeks, maybe. Who knows? It's just for what he brings in the teams. It's huge, and we'll get on to it. But so that, I think we've put on for the last 20 minutes, we're trying to just put a bit of context on why the scoreline was so, in Newcastle's favour. Yes, Villa didn't perform particularly well, but while Mings was on the pitch, we were in that game. For example, Konsa. I don't think Konsa was having a particularly poor game up until he made his mistake. But then in a 5-1 defeat, if you're a centre-back, you're going to have to be judged harshly. But I just don't think it was that game. And I'm glad that Eddie Howe as well saw it very similar to Emery and to how Villa fans would see it too. And he as soon as he sat down after answering a question about Tyrone Mings, he was saying, well, it's a 5-1, but there's a lot that we can work on there because Villa, for parts, worried us, and there was things that they need to improve on because we could have exposed. Gary Neville said the same thing. So that's why I think the reaction wasn't anything like it was against Bournemouth last season, where it was only 2-0. I say only 2-0. It was a bad result against a newly promoted team, but there was problems. You could see it. This game, there was problems. But why was the problems? I think that's what we're trying to sort of piece together. Like, I think a lot of people are judging Pau Torres straight away. It's just the last team that you wanted that to happen to, apart from maybe Man City, was Newcastle at St James's. And before the game, we were saying that. You're right, that I think Villa could have gone there and won on another day, another game with our fully fit squad. But there's always that chance they're going to blow you away if you give them the opportunity to. But as I say, we're just trying to piece together why that happened. It wasn't because we were particularly bad in terms of how we were trying to play. There was just lots of different things that happened in the game that didn't go in our way.
And I don't want to make excuses, like I said, and I think John McGinn said in an interview afterwards that we've spent a lot of money on someone like Pau Torres to come in and be a part of this squad, so there is no excuses. And I like that mentality because there shouldn't be. I don't want to just go, well, Tyrone Mings was injured and we all felt sad, so we threw the rest of the game off. That's not the case at all. But even if you don't even recognise it, that would have had an impact for some players. I think Tyrone Mings is 30. The Euros are in the summer. Probably not going to feature in that. Might not ever play for England again. England could win the Euros, and Tyrone Mings, who's just got back into the squad over the last year or whatever, will now no longer be a part of that unless he comes back way quicker than we all expect and has a great season and still goes on. It's very, very unlikely. And like I said, as a player, I would be thinking, wow, I am one bad tackle, or not even a tackle, just one instance of football away from having something like happen to me. Like, maybe I need to be more careful. It's just all these little things.
It makes your skin crawl when you see those. I mean, I don't know, just me personally. When you see bad injuries and you see, I don't know, broken ankles, you see broken legs, things like that on TV, on Sky Sports, it puts me off going for like a jog. I don't like to see that stuff anyway. Maybe that's just me. But again, if you go down to the human element, those players who know Tyrone Mings, I presume, is a very good friend of his. He knows that for the next 10 months, Tyrone Mings is going to be in probably a bad place mentally.
We know that because he's gone through that already. He's talked about it before, like turning to alcohol and things like that in the last injury that he had.
So I'll be honest, for that next 40 minutes against Newcastle, Villa are losing. Those players, I'm not trying to put words in their mouth or anything, but they probably don't want to be there. Put it that way. Yes, fans have travelled for hours to get up there and paid very good money, but I think even most ardent Villa fans will realise, okay, well, because that's how they would have felt as well. Everyone felt the same. As soon as Mings went down, okay, even if we took a point from this game, what's the main talking point? It's Mings being out for possibly 10 months or so. Yeah. So for the players on the pitch who know Mings better than all of us, it's going to have an impact. And I think that's after the game, there's going to be raw emotion of, oh my God, we just lost 5-1 away, worst possible start, which it is. But then why has that happened? Is it because we were particularly bad? No, possibly not. I think there's other things that happen. And yes, Kamara didn't play well. Bailey didn't play well. Those things can happen in a game, but does that mean you lose 5-1? Don't think so. It's the other stuff that adds with it.
As we've mentioned, the previous injury quickly, the one he sustained at Bournemouth, that was his left knee, and it was his anterior and medial ligaments, and he was out for, the estimate, I don't know what it was, but the estimate at the time was 9 to 12 months. August 2015, his Premier League debut against Leicester City. This time it's his right knee, which is never great for a player to have had a serious injury in both sides. Now, we don't know as of yet what it is. We expect it to be some kind of ligament damage or an ACL, things like that. But and I don't know whether we're reading too much into this, but the injury update that Villa posted for Emi Buendia said that he's suffered a significant knee ligament injury and will have a further consultation with a knee specialist. Tyrone Mings' update says he sustained a significant knee injury. He's undergone scans and will unfortunately require surgery ahead of a lengthy rehabilitation process. So you'd expect similar injuries, but the way that the club have phrased it is different. That could just be a press release and a tweet being slightly different, but it could also be that the injuries are different in senses. And I'm saying here that Tyrone Mings' could be worse than Emi Buendia's. On the Bournemouth one, again, just an interesting little quirk that it was Eddie Howe, who was the manager of Bournemouth at the time. Yep. He said about that Tyrone Mings injury in 2015, he said it restricted us tactically and also from the guys' perspective to see their teammates stretchered off. They're so tight here that it's a difficult one psychologically to handle. Tyrone didn't look good, and seeing him in that much pain isn't nice. And those comments could be copied and pasted for this weekend.
And he was asked after the game, basically the first question in the press conference was, do you manage Tyrone when he last had a very serious injury? But he sent his love to him and said that he knew, again, as we've just been saying, how much it impacted him and what an effect it can have on a player, that sort of injury. And yeah, it's not good. And I'm just pleased that all fans kind of get together with that sort of stuff. I mean, as I say, the Newcastle lot, as soon as they realised it was bad, it was like, oh, okay, well, it's that sort of spark between Villa fans and Newcastle fans at the moment, isn't there? But then it was like
and there's a bit of an anti-Tyrone Mings thing as well amongst.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say without saying it. For whatever reason, people like to try and load up, compilations of when he might have done a bad back pass or something, which is bizarre in itself. He's one of England's best defenders. Mings said himself on his Twitter post that he put out thanking Newcastle fans too. So. Yeah, overall, just a very, very desperate situation. Really, absolutely gutting for Tyrone himself, and as will everyone be at Villa. This is, along with John McGinn, he's taken the club from where it fell from into the Championship upwards. He was a lone player at the end of the day. People don't forget, but he had no real, apart from his own self-pride and to get himself back into a Bournemouth team in the Premier League potentially. He wanted to play well, but he didn't. He took everything with the club. And whenever the time comes that he leaves, there's always going to be a place for him at Villa Park. So it's really disappointing that it had to. I don't want to say end like this because I think he's still got years ahead of him. Of course he does, but he's 30 now, and when he returns, he'll be in the latter side of his career, potentially 2 bad injuries. you just hope he's going to recover as well as he has throughout his whole career. He's dealt with so much adversity from when he started. We all know his story, so we won't go into it too much. But and everything he does outside the pitch as well, it couldn't have happened to just no one deserves that injury. But I'm just gutted it had to fall to him at this point in his career as well. He's got European football to look forward to. He had. It's just said that he just got back into the England team. He's been saying about Unai Emery, the best coach he's worked with. He knows what it takes to become an elite centre back, and he was working his way towards that because he started his career slightly later. He's obviously had a years out with injuries, so in a way, he felt like he was, I don't know, maybe a 25-year-old, should we say? He's got years ahead of him, but these injuries can really take its toll. And when I spoke to him in the USA, he mentioned all those things about how Villa are doing so well. He's been on a great journey. He wants to win trophies. That's the next step, things like that. But then, honestly, the main thing that what he was saying was that I just want to keep playing and keep playing well under Unai and keep my place, do that stuff and enjoy my football. That was the main stuff. And it hit me after the game that he was saying that, because at the time it was almost like surely you want to win your trophy. Surely you want to go far with Villa in Europe. And yeah, all of those things are correct. But the main thing for Tyrone was just to continue playing well. And that's now been taken away from him, possibly for the season, which is really difficult for him to take. And obviously there's going to be consequences after that potentially as well. So yeah, absolutely good.
Villa's record without Tyrone Mings isn't great, which I'll go through in a second. But if Villa were to go on to have the season, and we'll talk about ambitions as well and how we feel after Newcastle, we're doing our season show and we're saying that Villa could probably win a trophy this year, whether it's the Conference League or the League Cup, depending on the draws you get. And Tyrone Mings isn't the captain at the moment. So he's not the one lifting silverware, but you could have envisaged a scenario where Grealish and James Chester lifted it together for the playoff final, that John McGinn and Tyrone Mings, these players that have come with us from the Championship, are the guys lifting a trophy at the end of the season. Now, Villa maybe won't go on to win anything this year because of this injury and the way it affects us. Hopefully not. But if we do, and Tyrone Mings is not a part of that, that's a huge shame for him personally as well, to not be part of that squad. That could be that he comes back in March, April, plays well for a couple of games and is involved with a Conference League final, for example. But that's best case scenario at this stage. Like, Villa, first of all, got to get there, and he's got to be back in time. It's a very difficult thing to do.
If Villa win the Conference League, then that's super, because Mings would have played his way in for Villa to get into Europe. But it's just that he wants to be a part of it all.
Of course,
as every player does, of course he does. But I think it's just for him. He's had it bad in his career. He's faced rejection early on, and obviously had bad injuries. So he's missed chunks of his career, and now he's finally on the straight and narrow. He's working under a top manager, which he deserves, with a good set of players, and he's got a key role to play. And that role is still there because he can be a leader at Bodymore when he returns, properly. But he wants to be on the pitch, and again, because of the issues that he's had previously, he's the kind of player that he has to be playing, and he needs that drive. What do you say? Really difficult.
I referenced Villa's record without Tyrone Mings. It's 12 games since 2019, 9 defeats, 2 draws, 1 win, 23 goals conceded. I take that with a pinch of salt that it's different managers, different systems. Tyrone Mings in different form than he has been over the last 12 months or so, where, to be honest, saying about like how good it's been for Villa as a whole, Tyrone Mings is in the best form of his life up until now as well. That's the extra kind of kick in the teeth. He's playing very, very good football. And I said this to Dan Bardell on Saturday evening. It's a big blow, isn't it? There's no other way to dress it up. It's a huge, huge miss for us.
That stat everyone know, one win in 12, and it was against Norwich, and even that game we were lucky to win back in 2019, I think. But that what's that, 3, maybe 4 games a season? So that proves that Mings has been pretty much always there. He's reliable in terms of that fitness. I don't remember him having a bad injury at Villa.
Which tells you that he recovered well from the Bournemouth injury in 2015. He came back and played well and hasn't had a big injury since then. So you'd maybe think that if he recovers well this time, he could go on to have another 3 or 4 years in his career at the top level, possibly. But like we have said, that was 2015. That was 7 years ago. He's 30 now. Maybe, and again, this is the point I've seen on social media, Tyrone Mings doesn't come back this season at all. So Villa replace him effectively. They sign new centre halves either this window or next summer, because Tyrone Mings is not up to the level, and this is almost the end of his Villa career of starting every week. I would suggest that probably wouldn't be the case. I think if he does recover well, he's still a massive leader for us and those kind of things, and still has a part to play.
And he signed a new contract recently, so whatever role Mings has when he comes back, there's a role there for him.
Yeah, exactly.
He's, alongside John McGinn, he's Mr. Aston Villa at the moment, isn't he? Like, he knows the club like the back of his hand. He's got the respect of everyone, and so even if he doesn't play this season, there's still something there for him. And I think that'll be very important. What Villa, when Villa go to away games and Tyrone Mings isn't there, that's an issue, because even if he was on the bench, at least he'd be around the place and he'd be motivating the lads and things like that. So I don't know, maybe when he's fit enough to travel around and things like that, maybe just bring him to away games, because he's still going to have that effect, isn't he? Yes, he's not playing, but you're going to miss a lot from him just not being in the dressing room, obviously. But that sort of stuff on a match day, I'm sure players would want to be around Tyrone and bounce off him, that sort of stuff as well. It's going to be gutting for him to be those games and not being able to play, of course, but being a part of it. Like Diego Carlos, for example, Steven Gerrard used him, the dressing room around Bodymore Heath and stuff, because obviously there's a big South American contingent, when he had his bad injury, but he would always say in press conferences whenever I'd ask him about his injury, and he'd always say, yeah, but he's still got a role to play, he's still a leader around the place, and he's still he still has his use. I don't doubt Tyrone's going to still have a role to play. It's just, it's really disappointing that obviously he's not going to be playing a part in at least the bulk of what is promised to be a really exciting campaign, and hopefully will still be a really exciting campaign. You just hope that at the end of it, Dan, if we do win the Conference League in Athens in June or something, Mings is there with McGinn lifting it up together, that sort of stuff. And that would be a horrible season for Mings in terms of not playing. But if it can end well like that, I think that's the positive you just got to look at the moment for him.
While we're talking about kind of leadership then and his dressing room presence, how do you feel that leadership role and that void in the side? Because the obvious answer from a football perspective is we've just spent 30-odd million on Pau Torres. He's a left-footed centre-half. There was the issues of can they play together? Torres can come in and replace him, and we'll talk about the structural changes there in a second. But from a leadership perspective, whatever you think of Tyrone Mings, and it still boggles the mind that there's people that think he's not a good footballer and he should have been replaced anyway. I think those people are in for a rude awakening when they see how much of an impact him not being around is about to have. No. From a leadership perspective, you've at least got to give him that. He is a massive, massive figure in the dressing room and on the pitch when it comes to organising things like a high line, which caused us issues on Saturday, which again is a topic we'll talk about. I don't think you can replace that leadership void unless you sign somebody for the sake of, well, he's a captain, he's an experienced 34-year-old or something. But even then, they're not integrated into the squad in the way Tyrone Mings was. Yeah. That part of him, whatever you think of him as a footballer, is irreplaceable.
It is completely irreplaceable. You can't directly replace Tyrone Mings on or off the pitch, in my opinion. You can try to, and you might come relatively close to it, but you can't directly replace him. I have no analysis there. You just can't. Players like Conser are going to have to step up. I think Dan Bardell mentioned that on the podcast post-match, which I think was a good point, because he's been at Villa now for quite a few years and he's stepping up into his, he's not young anymore, put it that way. And I certainly think he can, go some way to fill that void. But on the pitch, I think that's where the concern would be, because I don't think Villa have a direct replacement for Mings. And I don't think that's Torres. And I don't think Torres was actually brought in to... He was obviously brought in to compete for places and it adds more competition. But it's a direct replacement. It's not for a direct replacement. If direct competition, it's not for Mings. It can't be. He's not physical like Mings. He doesn't win his aerial duels like Mings. But what he does do is he progresses the ball extremely well. I see Diego Carlos more as a replacement for Tyrone. We saw it, obviously, he came on, I think it was for John McGinn and against Newcastle. I think if you play that three that Emery has been thinking of, Torres has to play off the left for me, because he's not... For the weaknesses in his game would be more obvious if he was playing as the central centre-back, and all of his positives are kind of based on that left side. He can step out and he can use the ball really well. So I think he's fixed in that position for me. So it'd be Carlos, Conser, Pau as a back three, Moreno on the left. On the right, you have a player, maybe a new arrival, who knows. Then your goalkeeper. That then leaves only Chambers as a defensive option. But in the USA, Emery said that he's kind of not really in his options to play at centre-back. He said that he's there and he's good as a versatility player to play in midfield or at right-back. So maybe he could play that role that Conser plays. I'm not sure, but the Mings injury that he puts us back, all of a sudden you're thinking, well, have we got enough at centre-back? I can't see Torres and Conser playing as a two. Maybe they will, I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Talk to me about the high line a little bit. Is that now an issue? because it's one game this season where it's like, oh, okay, the whole line looks susceptible. People are just harking back to Ian Wright last season on Match of the Day saying, oh, someone will batter Villa one day with the high line game. He was right.
No, he was right all along.
But the high line worked for us last year and it got us to 7th place in the Premier League. And we had a barnstorm in 2023 playing the way that we were playing against Newcastle United, only that we were doing it well last season rather than on Saturday we weren't. Dan said on the post-match show that Tyrone Mings is pivotal to playing high line because he organises it. He's got the athleticism and the pace to deal with it and make changes and to be able to drop back. That I don't think Torres possesses those qualities. Is this a case of now we'll carry on playing the way we are and the players we've got have got to adapt to it and get used to it? We'll come on to transfers in a bit, but will we sign a new centre-half that can play that way of football and slot in for Tyrone Mings? Or do we have to abandon playing the high line because Mings was so crucial to it?
No, you don't abandon playing the high line because that's throwing your principles out the window. The reason why we play the high line is to win the ball back in the final third and to control the game, and that's everything that Emery wants from this team. I do take on board that it's going to be, we're almost going back months now, not in terms of when we have possession, I don't think, because actually I think when we have possession, I think we'll be very good because we have Pau Torres and he's exceptional at moving the ball and progressing it, and we have Tielemans, players like that who can all progress the ball well. But from a defensive point of view, as we saw against Newcastle, who were very quick on transition, which Emery said after the game as well, them and Brentford, it's one ball over the top or one ball down the channel and you've got a problem. So, and that's exactly what we saw at the weekend. Emery, is not going to change what he's trying to be building into this team or this group for the last few months. And
is that stubbornness?
No.
Or is it a good coach sticking to what they know? Because I had a tweet just before we started saying, how bad will it have to be for you to start questioning Emery and giving him some criticism? And I replied saying, is that a dig like that I'm always pro Emery kind of thing? And it was a genuine conversation to say, no, not a dig. I was just kind of checking in to just ask the question. Now, I don't think the person who tweeted that is suggesting that we've got to be Emery out because we've lost a game to Newcastle, and I would absolutely be nowhere near that. How bad would it have to be to start questioning him? You can question him whenever if he makes decisions that you don't agree with, but we often say this thing of trusting Emery because if he wants that player or he wants to do this thing, he's God, kind of let him do what he wants. And I agree with that. But if we lose 10 in a row, of course we start to ask questions about Emery. That's absolutely natural. You absolutely can question him because some of the decisions on Saturday evening were questionable. The starting 11, even McGinn playing on the left when he was so good on the right last season, so good on the right, particularly against Newcastle, up against Dan Burn. Bailey continuing to start and feature in games when he doesn't seem up to it, in my opinion at least. And in the latter stages of that Newcastle game, continuing to play the high line when it clearly wasn't working. I'm not saying it's a stubbornness, come on, Emery, change it, as if I'm the expert, but Newcastle were massively exploiting that. And again, things we've spoken about with the Mings situation is a factor. But if Newcastle can thread through you so easily playing that high line, at some point, do you, as the head coach, not have to say, okay, well, let's just drop back 10 yards. Let's just change it a little bit and try and not make this a bloodbath.
I do take on the points, of course. Everyone will question why we did certain things. Emery, I don't know quite to put this without sounding like I'm never going to say anything negative about any tactic that we do, but there's a reason why he does everything. John McGinn did so well against Dan Burn in that game at home that it was almost so obvious that, okay, well, we'll just do that again. He's put him on the other side. There's a reason behind that. And I can't sit here and bash that decision without knowing what Emery was thinking. And I just think he's got the CV, he's got everything behind him. He's got enough there for me to say, oh, why did you do that for? That was the wrong decision. I'm sure there was a reason why he's done that. And again, I don't want that to sound like I'm never going to question a tactic because, yeah, I'm with you, Dan. I'm not sure why he did that. And I don't know. So that is a criticism, but there'll be a reason why for sure. And just on that Pau Torres and playing the high line stuff, at Villarreal, Torres played in a high line, and didn't look out of place at all. I don't want to say he's like deceptively quick, but he's got long enough legs to make up those yards. I know that sounds quite basic, but he would be playing with Raul Albiol, who's a much more aggressive, like a Diego Carlos, Tyrone Mings sort of defender. And it worked well because one would, apply the pressure. Torres would always cover and sweep around on the side. He did the same thing when he played for Spain with Sergio Ramos as well, and it worked really well. So I honestly just put that game down to lots of different reasons in terms of Mings, the psychology of the players, different things. And as you said, there's going to be teething issues at the moment. It's been brought in from the cold, as was Carlos in a way. He just brought in. You don't often see centre backs being brought into games that late on. And again, why Emery's done that is, I'm not too sure, but there's obviously reasons why you take off John McGinn for Diego Carlos. The game turned, to be fair, on that. It didn't turn, but when Matty Cash missed that opportunity, I think at that point as well, that's another layer of context as like, well, we're not going to get back into this, are we? And I don't want it to sound like our players are weak. They have a weak mentality or anything like that. I just think that Mings injury would have set us back a lot. You have to believe in your principles, and ultimately those principles got us into the top 7 when we were 17th or something. So,
and that's why he's built up enough goodwill for me not to be sitting here going, well, Emily's got 10 games for me to decide whether he should stay or go. Like, come on. What about fitness? What did you think of the fitness levels of the two sides?
The 5K, like, sorry.
Not your fitness. Newcastle looked super fit, and again, there's the context that they're winning, they're at home, they're spurred on by a great atmosphere. It's going to give you an extra 2%, even is enough to make you look better than you are. The fitness levels of the two sides look totally different. To consider that we both played this summer series thing, so the travelling isn't really a huge excuse. Some people in the comments of the Saturday show were saying, was playing in the heat in Valencia last week a mistake? Like, was that too much after playing Lazio a couple of days before? Firstly, I'm not sure. Secondly, that was a week ago. Like, it shouldn't make a difference at all. But they looked a yard quicker and sharper than some of Villa's players. That Villa looked maybe rusty or sloppy, whereas Newcastle were super on it. And I haven't got the running stats in front of me, but I would suggest that Newcastle put more kilometres in than Villa did. Is that a problem? Are Villa not fit enough for the new season yet?
I don't think we can question it in terms of have they been putting in enough work, that sort of thing, because ultimately that's what we're alluding to. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think Newcastle, they're a very physical team for a start. You know, when you got Joel Linton running around in the midfield, there aren't many players in European football, I don't think, that could match Joel Linton for how he hustles and bustles, maybe apart from John McGinn, but obviously he's not playing up against him all the time. I'm not so sure. I think, again, you're looking at it and thinking it's a home crowd. They were winning pretty much throughout the whole game in terms of Tonali. That took 6 minutes. We equalised for, what was that? Again, probably 7 minutes. So only for about 12, 13 minutes of the football match were they drawing. The rest of it, they were winning. You're going to have that momentum. The crowd are on their side. And I'm not sure. Not so sure. You can maybe look at it, but I don't think that's sort of the be all and end all. I think the stuff that we've covered previously is probably more relevant. We'll see how it plays out in the coming weeks, but Villa will be fit enough. I don't doubt that. The
mood and the atmosphere is different. If Villa look really fit against Everton and do win 3-0, for example, the general vibe to everything will feel different. It won't be any questions about fitness or tactics or anything.
I think it's more so that Newcastle are just a very fit and well-organised athletic team, and they've got all the momentum in the game pretty much throughout the whole thing. Villa are going to be chasing around a little bit and committing fouls here and there. I don't think that means that we're unfit or not ready for the season. We were only saying last week that we probably had the best season in living memory. So,
a couple of final points then about the future and the rest of the season, and also transfers is a bit of a roundup because it's been a mad almost 24 hours since the Newcastle game. As I said at the start, there was kind of these questions thrown my way just because I predicted us to win on TikTok comments and stuff, which is not the be-all end all. Trust me, saying like, "Oh, look at this guy predicted Villa to win and win trophies this season, and they get battered 5-1." Like, I get it. I take the point. It looks bad. Does that defeat against Newcastle alter your expectations of the season ahead? Are you now thinking, "Oh, I was wrong to predict Villa top 7 or whatever it was"?
Still full steam ahead. The Mings, how we react to that and what happens after it, I don't actually think we'll be aware of in terms of results. I think it's for the players. They just need to rally behind each other, and I think it could have that sort of galvanising effect of, well, you know, Tyrone's not here now. We're going to have to group to get. Yeah, almost. I mean, we saw before the game against Newcastle, they had the shirts for Buendia. They're going to have more shirts again next weekend, unfortunately, and hopefully that's the last time we'll have to, you know, print off custom shirts. Yeah, you want to do it for your 200 teammates, I suppose, but it's just a big loss, isn't it, Mings? We've just spoken about it for an hour. It hasn't affected how I think Villa will finish the season. I still think we can absolutely compete for the top 7, and I backed us to do it with Mings and Buendia at the time. I still think Villa will be in the top half. And if you're in the top half come, should we say, May or April, you're going to be a few points away from 7th. I don't think there's 7 teams that will run away from Villa, if you put it like that. The Conference League as well, I still make Villa they should be one of the favourites to win that competition for sure. And as I say, if Mings and Buendia can maybe not return, they don't have to return to be playing necessarily, but if they're, you know, if there's light at the end of the tunnel for them, Villa can hit the end of the season well, I still think, because you've got momentum of those two players maybe coming back. There's more positivity, the back around body, more that sort of stuff. The fans, we could be winning our first trophy in 28 years at that point. So I think Villa have a big opportunity at the end of the season to really hit some momentum. It's just get through the next few months. I think that's which is going to be vital, because every month is massively important when you're going for those, not top positions, but top 7 or so, because there are some very good teams in the Premier League.
It's what I said in the season preview, that success for me this year would be that next year we're still in some kind of European competition. Yeah. So if we win the Conference League, considering what's happened to us, and finish 9th, that's a brilliant season, considering, again, we could go on to still be very good without Mings, but as it feels right now, to do that would still be a very good season for me, and it would get you in to the Europa League for next season, which is that's what it's about. Where we are this season. That's what it's about, continuous improvement. So that would be an unbelievable season. So I don't feel like I could sit here now and say Villa are going to finish top 5. If Villa go out and sign another excellent centre-half, maybe you'd think, I'm rejuvenated. And like I said, we could win the next 3 games and we all feel totally differently about everything. But I think to take off any kind of bias glasses for a second, or claret and blue tinted glasses is the phrase, bias glasses, to go all the way in the Conference League and win it, whether you think that's an easier composition to win than anything else, it's still a task to get there and do it. So winning the Conference League is not my sole aim for the season, but I would take a drop off in the league if we won that, considering what happened at Newcastle.
Be a whole lot of pressure in that final, wouldn't it? If we had your season comes down to a 90-minute game or extra time or penalties, touch wood, that we'll do it in 90 minutes. But that point you made there, Dan, about being in Europe next season, that's Villa are only going to get better under Emery, in my opinion. So with every passing transfer window, with every other 80 to 100 million pounds spent, Villa are going to get better. So that's, and I will say, I don't care what other clubs do in the Premier League. If Villa are getting better, then they will improve. And because some of those clubs in the top 7 might stay still, or stand still, sorry. Things like that. And a couple of clubs are in a bit of a rebuild, and they'll be looking at us now and thinking, it's a bad start for Villa, and they've got 2 of the big players out. How are they going to react? Are they going to finish in the top half? That sort of thing. It's just focus on yourself, and hopefully, as I say, over the next few months we can get back together. If we get through the next few months, as you say, next 3 games even, and we're okay in a good position, well then there's positivity again, and we don't have to reflect so badly on what's just happened. It's just a massive shame that for those players they're going to have to live it. They're going to be out and not playing football for 9 to 10 months, which is obviously a massive crying shame for them. But they'll get the support from the fans throughout the whole time, and obviously from the club as well, and the support team there. Let's
wrap up then with transfers. Centre-back options is the obvious discussion point at the moment. How do we replace Buendia and Mings? Do we have to make 2 more signings in those positions? Zaniolo is one that is continuously linked with what looks like a loan move with an option to buy, but there's some question marks around his attitude I've seen and his injury record, which again, not ideal. The Jack Harrison thing was weird yesterday. So Sunday, I think that was happening, Sunday evening, that I hadn't been on my phone for a few hours, and the way the Twitter algorithm is now, that you'll see things from hours ago like next to each other. Yeah. And it was like, Fabrizio Romano was saying that we'd went in for an offer and it was all happening, and everyone was, good player, like decent player, Jack Harrison. I think he'd offer something, and as I was seeing it, I was like, decent. I'll plan a podcast on Monday for that. Like, we'll do some research. Then a couple of tweets up, it's like, well, Everton are interested. Hang on a minute, what happened here? And then it's that Villa were trying to hijack it and then found out he was injured for 6 weeks or something. I don't know what happened there, whether it was that it was old information that was all kind of came out at once, but I saw people kind of going, Villa don't know what they're doing. They're going after Jack Harrison, and then he's injured. Or what the hell? So if you can, explain that to me a little bit, but in some ways you at least know that we're still looking for creative options. That's something. The Zaniolo thing, which does seem like it probably will happen if we're to put our cards on the table, and then centre-half as well. How do you assess that?
There's a lot of questions, Stan.
Sorry.
That's fine.
We're getting to the end of the show here.
Yeah. That's what happens when transfers are played over Twitter, I think, with the Jack Harrison saga. Obviously, it was blown out of proportion, a little bit. Everton, he has a clause in his contract that when he got relegated at Leeds, because he was going to join Leicester in January before that collapsed, signed a new contract with Leeds, but then obviously had the clause of you can leave on loan for a season back to a Premier League team, which is good business, actually, I think, for basically half of the league. So I think he's a very good player, and he's a good utility player as well. He can play on either wing, and it doesn't really matter because he's joined Everton now. But Villa obviously had an interest. Harrison obviously keen to join Villa, but that injury record, and plus he's injured at the moment with a hip injury for what could be 5-6 weeks or so. I think it's more interesting though that Villa are clearly looking in that position though. I think that's the takeaway from it. They were looking at Harrison. There's obviously the players that they're looking at now, and I wouldn't be surprised that how many weeks do we have left? 2 weeks of the window, is it? I wouldn't be surprised if they get someone through the door who can play on at least one wing, obviously, but I think there needs to be a player that offers something going the other way as well. They need to be athletic and can go up and down. It doesn't have to be necessarily a fullback or a player who is a traditional winger who gets to the byline, just someone who can operate on those wings and do a job and who is reliable. That's what Jack Harrison would have been if he wasn't injured. Zaniolo, obviously a completely different profile. At the time of recording, Villa hope that they can sign again on a loan, which is good for FFP, an option to buy as well. That will hopefully be done this week. It hasn't been signed off yet, though, and an agreement hasn't been found. Again, things move so quickly in the transfer window, and things change as well. By the time recording, that's Zaniolo, who obviously wants to come to Villa as well from Galatasaray. He only joined them in February. Monchi signed him for Roma back in 2018, had a fantastic breakthrough season in the Serie A, won the Serie A Young Player of the Year, but he's had a couple of injuries, a couple of bad injuries as well. If he is to join, then that won't happen because we obviously got very bad luck at the moment. But I think it'd be a good addition. Again, it's very low risk. It's a loan with an option to buy at the end of the season if we want to take that up. He is a player that Monchi has obviously followed for years, so I don't doubt that they see space for him in Emery's squad. And Villa do need depth. He's not a winger and he's not a striker, but he can operate across different positions. He's not a winger and a striker. He can play in those positions, but Emery made it clear in his press conference when he was asked about it last week that he's versatile and he can operate across different roles as a 10, as a 7, things like that. So I think that's one that Villa would like to get done as soon as they can. On the centre-back, just to wrap up, Emery said after Mings' injury at the weekend, he said, we're trying to be intelligent in the window after these 2 injuries. We're going to analyse the squad and the way we are going to face this year. So obviously not much there, but he certainly didn't shoot down the idea of signing to the centre-back. He didn't turn it down, but at the same time, that's in the aftermath of losing 5-1. I don't think he was thinking about replacing Mings at that point. So they'll assess the squad and we'll see what they think is best moving forward.
Right, John, thank you for joining me this afternoon. That's the first of our Monday show, Claret and Blue podcast episodes. Like I said at the beginning, this podcast will be here every single Monday, roughly the same kind of time, though we're recording this later in the day than I would like going forward. We'll hopefully do things first thing in the morning and have it out for lunchtime. We tried to be, I don't think positive is the right word, but not as doom and gloom as maybe some fans would be expecting. I think we've been quite measured and balanced in our approach to how we feel about things and looking at almost both sides of the coin. That yes, Newcastle was a bad defeat. But,
it's an overall view of what we've just seen over the last few days. Whatever we've seen, whether we win 5-1 or lose 5-1, I think there's lots of different ways to take every result and every piece of news. So.
And the structure of this show will change week to week. If, for example, Ollie Watkins scores a hat-trick against Everton, maybe the whole show is about Villa strikers over the years and how Watkins ranks amongst them. Like, this show can be anything, really. It can be a look back and a look ahead and going in depth on different topics as well. Like I said, we'll have some special guests over the season as well. It won't always just be me and John. So stay tuned to see who it could be next Monday, because we'll be here same time, same place. Our next video on Claret and Blue will likely be the Everton preview, which will be Friday, I expect. But if you only tune in to one show a week, it'll be the Monday show. So we'll see you again next Monday. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.